Hi everybody, welcome to my channel, Life, Law, Bin.
Right.
Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today I have with me a very special guest. I have Dr. Yves Remy with me. We first met when I did my internship at the Sridhar Ramphal Center. That was last year already, Jan?
Last year,
Time
and you're
flew.
an excellent intern.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yes,
Don't make me blush on the
that's
channel, though.
can't blush,
um,
really.
so I definitely knew I had to get Jan to come onto the channel and give some insight because I thought it would be very interesting to hear a focus on international trade law, as that is your expertise. But before we delve into that, I wanted you to share with our viewers just briefly your experience studying the LLB in the Caribbean first.
Right. Well, thanks for having me. It's such a pleasure to be here, and I've been looking at some of your shows before, which are excellent. I wish I had that when I was going to do law. But yeah, I don't know if you featured the Caribbean yet, but I'm glad that you turned to the region as a place to study law. I always wanted to go abroad, but my entire family did UE, so it's kind of a tradition in my family to do my first degree there. So I did my first 3 years of the LLB at the Cape Hill campus. At the time, all of the sort of the OECS Barbados students would do their first years at Cave Hill, and then we'd be joined in the second and third years by the students who had enlisted in the law faculties in Jamaica and Trinidad. So the second year was really exciting because you got to mix with so many other students from across the region, and I can tell you that is by far the best, was for me the best part of the experience. I mean, understanding the law from a very Caribbean perspective is also really important to me as a Caribbean person. But what really, really, I think has endured is the friendships and the networks that you create by virtue of the cross Caribbean linkages you make in the second and third years, and then the bear lines, and then the island weeks, and then the football and the football competition. It generated all this, interregional nice rivalry. But you then created these friendships so much so that now I would say 25 years after I graduated from law school, we had an online virtual sort of reunion with students from my year. And because of COVID, we couldn't meet in person. And it was just such a wonderful, time. It was 20 years. I don't think it was 25, 20 years. Yes, I'm aging myself. But I think at the end of the day, this is exactly what I loved most about the Caribbean legal experience at university. It was
That,
great.
no, that sounds awesome. You had me at the beer limes. I obviously I didn't get to benefit from any beer limes. Down here it's the pub. It's the pub vibe.
There
But
you go.
yeah, but when you left now, because we know you pursued the bar course in the United Kingdom, how was it for you adjusting? Because obviously you left the beautiful Caribbean to come up to good old England.
Oh, England. Well, actually, they skipped a step. The only reason I didn't do my sort of the legal certificate course in Jamaica or Trinidad, the Norman Manley or Hugh Wooding, is because I actually decided to pursue a master's first at Cambridge University. So I was there for 1 year. And in order for me to kind of recoup that extra year that I had taken off, I decided to stay in London to do the bar. And so I did the bar vocational course at the Inns of Court School of Law in London. And yes, that was an interesting time. I mean, it's cold in the winter months. The summer is wonderful, but it's such a very different experience studying in London and at Cambridge. I loved my time in the Caribbean because it was so familiar. But I equally love my time overseas because I've always seen myself as an internationalist, like somebody who would be interested in meeting people from all over the world. And so that experience I got from being in England. So I don't remember much. Just in this discussion, I'm talking a lot about the experiences outside the classroom. But these are the things that you actually remember, right? These are the friendships that you create and the international experience you have. So London was great. It's so multicultural. And you meet people, as I said, from all over the world. So that is really what topped it off for me.
Jan, do you remember which inn of court you joined?
Oh, geez, yes, that I remember. I know most Caribbean students do Lincoln's Inn. I was in a temple because my aunt had studied in London like years before. So that's a tradition. I did, yeah, in a temple.
Okay, well, I'm in Gray's Inn. I just was wondering if you,
Oh,
yeah, I was wondering if you remembered which
I
inn
did.
you joined.
I
No,
did.
I feel like it's always a burning question for students,
Mm,
the specific area you'd go to study law, but the area you'd want to focus on. And I
yeah.
always wondered to myself, how would we know exactly, well, this is it. This is my passion. So this brings me on to our next question.
Mm.
What was your initial involvement in international trade law and dispute settlement? What was that like?
That's a really good question because I kind of sailed through first and second year of my undergrad not knowing what I wanted to do, and I was getting really anxious about it because a lot of my friends knew they wanted to do criminal law, they wanted to do civil law, they wanted to do admin law, constitutional law. I was never really excited by any of these. So when in my third year, I kind of encountered international trade. At the time, it was international economic law. I was like, finally, I felt so engaged. And the reason why is because it's so interdisciplinary. So it's not a hard black letter law sort of area. It was kind of, it engages economics, international relations. And from the time I was this high, I always thought I wanted to be a diplomat. So when I realized that international trade law was about being really in the Geneva and part of the World Trade Organization where there are diplomats and then there are legal officers and then there are economists, etc. And you speak all these different languages in Geneva, etc. For me, I just was so engaged. And I would say to people that, and I say this to students all the time, even those who are not even engaged in one field or another, just students who don't know if they want to be a lawyer, a doctor, an electronic engineer. What I say is take every experience you have and exploit it because you don't really know how it's all going to stack up. So I did French at school. And then when I ended up in Geneva, of course, I loved French, but I knew I didn't want to be like a linguist. But all of these experiences ultimately counted when I was in Geneva doing international trade law. So that's why I say, like, enjoy the place you're in, and try not to get, I know this is easy for me to say, but try not to get too anxious about the fact that you haven't really received your calling. And sometimes you have to create the space for yourself. Because it's not identifiable from the things you're seeing people doing. Like it's not appealing to you. Sometimes it's just that you have to create your own new space and kind of enjoy it. So just enjoy the moment you're in is the advice I would give. But for me, as soon as I kind of encountered trade law, I was like, this is it. This is what I want to do with my life.
Oh, that's great because I know that's definitely the moment, the defining moment that most students are waiting for. Because sometimes you feel like, I think I can do this, and then you're like, I don't think I want to do it anymore.
Right,
um,
right.
yeah, and as you rightfully said, there are a lot of people around you who know what they want to do. Now, I know that you did spend some time working at the World Trade Organization.
I
Could
did.
you shed some light on that experience? Because I think that in and of itself is spectacular to hear.
Right. So the World Trade Organization is sort of this organization that's responsible for negotiations on international trade. It's the members are WTO. Um, the members of the WTO are countries. And so all CARICOM except the Bahamas are members, but equally the United States, Canada, Japan, Chile, China. So it's really an intergovernmental organization. But in addition to being sort of a point for negotiations, it's also an area where they settle disputes. And so I applied as an intern back in the day when I was just fresh out of my experience in England. I decided to apply for an internship, and I got in as an intern. And once I got to Geneva, Switzerland, and I got into the WTO, as I said to you, like that was home for me because my friends became people from all over the world, and I got to practice my French, and I was just loving the trade law aspect as well. So once I had done the 3 month internship, I kind of had set in my mind a target. This is what I want to do. So I came back to the region. I worked at the time, it was the RNM, which is responsible for regional trade negotiations. And then I started a PhD. And in the middle of the PhD at Duke University, the SJD, I applied for this position that had come up at the appellate body, so the appeals court at the WTO. And I got in. And so I actually moved my PhD to Geneva. So I was doing the PhD and I was also working at the WTO. And for me, it was one of the best 6 years of my life in the sense of the work environment. Kind of, for me, the work was challenging, but also very exciting because you're deciding or you're helping judges decide cases that come up between countries, in the context of disputes. But it's also such a fun place. Like people don't find Geneva exciting, but because it's for me so multicultural, and my friends were Brazilians and Germans and Chinese and Australians, and that was for me the part that made it so exciting because you're really literally engaging with people at that level from all over the world, but you're also having fun with them. You're going skiing on weekends and you're traveling to Paris on another weekend. So it was for me really a really rewarding time.
Do you remember what a typical working week entailed?
Oh gosh. Well, it's cyclical. So when you're in the context of a dispute, you're working all hours of all hours of the day and sometimes into the night. And so you would go in, you do research for the judges because ultimately they make the decisions, but you give them your research and you prepare what we call issues papers, which is your advice to them on how they might want to decide the dispute. So a lot of the work we were doing was that kind of research, looking at past case law, how it applied to a new set of facts before them in the context of the dispute. And then you would advise them when they came into Geneva orally, because their job is part-time and you're permanent. So the judges come in and when they have to decide a dispute, you speak with them. And then, it's really, really like a lot of hours once they're in Geneva, but when they're not, it kind of calmed down a little bit. So, and then also because as I mentioned, WTO is also a place where delegates, diplomats come in to continually negotiate agreements. You would also be servicing these kinds of committees where they're sitting down having these discussions and that sort of thing. So your work could be like committee work. We did less of that at the appellate body because we're supposed to be separate from the membership and kind of, as a judge, you serving judges, you don't want to get involved too much in the ongoing negotiations. But sometimes we would sit in on these discussions and offer legal advice as well. So
okay, that sounds very interesting. As definitely sounds very interesting, and it just crossed my mind. There may be some viewers that would be interested in getting that kind of experience. So I was wondering if you knew any particular way that they could apply to gain one of these internships, to better themselves.
right, and that's really a great. I mean, one of the callings I have coming back to the Caribbean after my time in Geneva, and then I was in Washington afterwards, is really to give students more opportunities than I had when I was at UWI, in the sense that make it seem much more possible. At the time, I mean, there were a few people who were in Geneva and doing this kind of work, but they weren't tangible to me. They weren't right there. I had to like do a lot of research to figure them out. So what I would say is right now at Cave Hill, if you're at Cave Hill, we now there's an international trade law class, like it always has been, but in addition, we put on a course called Trade Lab, which is really about students giving actual advice on trade law matters to beneficiaries, which are government entities or NGOs in the Caribbean. And so it's part of a network. And so one way of getting involved and understanding the trade environment is to actually begin working on cases or giving advice. But the way they can directly apply is usually, if you want to get into that, so you have to have studied some kind of international trade law, either at an undergraduate as well as a master's level. And their masters, we offer in the Sridhar Rampal Center, we offer a master in international trade policy, which is interdisciplinary. But if you wanted to focus on a real LLM, which is a master's in law that specializes in trade, I believe the Cape Hill faculty is offering that more and more, but also there are international opportunities that you can pursue. And so you would have to have that as a prerequisite, some kind of international master's course or master's training, and then you would apply for an internship at the WTO. And for us from the region, because we're so underrepresented, you would stand a really good shot once you apply to the committee. So there's a standardized form you apply, and then the WTO persons will look at the application and you get an internship there, which lasts for 3 months, pays a little stipend. But for me, that was my entry point, and so you really need to apply for these things in order for you to be considered. And it just opens up a world of opportunities thereafter. And then the second thing I would do is we now do moot court competitions in trade. So once and a lot of the students that we actually, when I was at the WTO, that we took on as interns, it was because they featured prominently in these moot court competitions. And I can tell you, you feel like, oh, I'm from a little island, etc., etc. But that's how I got my break as well. When you show yourself as being capable and able to compete at that level, regardless of where you're from, a developed or a developing country, people notice you. And then when you apply for internships, you're like, oh, you remember her, you remember him, he made really great arguments. And so this year we had students who performed really, really well in the regional round of the moot court competition, and they came second to Harvard University. And so they really distinguished themselves. I'm really proud of them. So I would say these are the sorts of avenues, if you're really interested in international trade, that you can pursue and would give you an opening.
That's definitely some great advice, and I know someone is going to seize that opportunity, seize that advice, and run with it. Now, if anyone was keenly listening, they'd recognize that you mentioned the Sridhar Rampal Center. What is your nature, the nature of your work at this organization? Because I know you're the deputy director, but what does a typical work week involve for you?
Oh gosh, well now with COVID, it's like webinars, webinars, webinars. So we are a center, campus center at the university, Cape Hill campus. And what we do is we have three pillars that we kind of execute on. One is the training. I mentioned the Master's in International Trade Policy, which we invite all students to apply for, irrespective of the discipline you're coming from. So if you could be a lawyer, you could be a international economic relations specialist, whatever. And it's a 9-month course with an added complement of a study tour to Geneva, actually. Now with COVID, we've been doing these virtual tours. So instead of going physically, you get the lecturers in Geneva who would have otherwise appeared to students face-to-face coming in online. So that's our masters, and we're doing more and more short courses. We have done them before, we'll be bringing them back on professional development. We also do research. We're trying to really invigorate that arm. So we put out some publications recently. Visit our website, sri.rampalcenter.com. And so we do research on trade-related impacts of on the Caribbean. And there's not so much work on how trade affects Caribbean and Caribbean trade policy, and that's the research arm. And then finally, outreach. So we sometimes put out SRC trading thoughts in local and regional news media, and I think Mia, you did one on Brexit, right? That we put out. Yeah, exactly. So we get either staff of the SRC or we get guest contributors to write on a topic of interest that, if you did Brexit, and we get, on any issue that impacts the Caribbean trade. So that's kind of the three things that we do.
And I know, speaking from my experience working that internship that we did have, I quite enjoyed it. The staff, they're very warm, welcoming, and friendly. It's such a relaxing environment. It really does encourage a good and positive and strong work ethic, because it's not too stringent. So everyone is quite relaxed, but yet everyone is still on task. I quite enjoyed it myself there, and obviously it gave me an opportunity to write and contribute to the trading thoughts as well. And you would have helped me edit that piece. So thank you. Thank you for that. And I'm still gonna definitely hold us to the project that we were working on. I think I don't know if you remember it.
Of course I remember. I remember.
You-
I have the draft. We're waiting for you to come back.
No, yeah, so we definitely have to continue working on that because I actually think it's something that would be very helpful, and I think it's needed because I don't think we have enough information and enough voices being lent from the Caribbean to these kind of issues. And I'm always, anyone that knows me, I always think that we are stronger together. I know we may have our petty or very tiny little rivalries, but I always think we're stronger together, especially studying in the UK. They all just see us as one, so why not be one?
Right, right,
Yeah.
right. Like, I mean, the funny thing about this is yesterday I was doing a course. I was teaching on regional integration, and what strikes me is that everyone you talk to or you give a lecture to, it seems so patently obvious that the way to go is through regional integration. And it almost sounds like naive to say, oh, we all should regionally integrate because that's the way of the future and that's how we become more competitive. But I mean, it's so obvious, but what is preventing it? I mean, the OECS, I was having a conversation yesterday, somebody was like, OECS is a perfect example of how it's not even a big deal anymore. The OECS, we have our common currency, we have our common court systems, we have so many things. We have a telecommunication regulatory authority. It's not even in question that this is the way to go for the OECS sub-region. Somebody was saying, we should invite people to join the OECS because it's working. It's working effectively. And I don't mean to steal this person's thunder, but it's clearly the way we should be going is the OECS route. So if CARICOM could just do more of that kind of integration. And I think COVID has shown that it can happen under stress. But we're working incredibly well together since COVID happened.
Yeah, definitely. And obviously before we wrap up our conversation, do you have any advice, maybe 2 or 3 top tips for students interested in pursuing this path, a similar path? Any advice that comes to mind?
Yeah. I mean, what I would say is to start with, you may not follow a beaten path. Even in trade, it may not be that you're seeing or the opportunities are arising that are allowing you to follow a path that has been trodden by somebody else. And I think what I would advise is that sometimes you have to do it yourself. You literally have to create that path for yourself. And I feel that that's what I did there in the space I'm in. I didn't see many people doing exactly that thing, and that's fine. The second thing I would say is write. I think we in the Caribbean need to write more. And even now, with all of the stuff I'm doing, I'm not writing as much as I would like. But in this space, the people who seem to be doing well are people who have an opinion on something. I got this advice from, an old mentor a long time ago who said, people will follow you and listen to you if you write. And there's so much happening in international trade right now that even with the little bit of information you might be getting formally on a course, you can take that and extrapolate and try to combine different facts and perspectives and then put your own piece out there. So I would really encourage people, even if it's not something you want to publish yet, just write it down. Put your thoughts together and become creative. And then the final thing I would probably say is you kind of have to be a little bit insistent about what you want and not give up when things begin clamoring down on you. Because there's a lot of people who start off right on the path and then they give up, or they feel overwhelmed by the situation they're in. And that's easy for me to say. That's what they say. Oh yes, you've done it. But I did it because I didn't give up. And as I said, by the time I was very young, I always knew that I wanted to be international. I wanted to pursue an international kind of occupation or career. And so even if you get, distracted, etc., you need to get back up and continue and see where you're going. My father always, said to me, clear the path and keep going, just keep going. So I would just advise, and this is irrespective of your discipline, but especially in a discipline that is not obvious. You're not going into domestic law, you're not going into criminal law, if you're going into something where there are not many other people you're seeing doing it, you kind of have to believe in your dream and then just pursue it.
Yeah.
That's my advice.
And fantastic advice. And I think COVID almost has a kind of a dual effect. It makes people become more innovative, because even now, a lot of law students aren't getting as much work experience, internships, as they usually would pre-COVID.
Yes.
I know they're virtual assignments that you can seize, or some people actually decided to develop blogs, use the time to develop blogs, whether that may be written or the same YouTube platform that we're using now to disseminate some information. And it's all in building a personal brand as well, something that you can refer to. So I think that that's fantastic advice. And I definitely want to say thank you for coming on to the channel. I know you're a very busy woman, so
Not
thank you
that.
very much.
Thank you for having me. It's an excellent little channel you have here, and I will be promoting it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thanks, everyone, and we'll see you on the next video.